Hello, and welcome to the Come to Your Senses podcast. I'm your host, embodiment-based coach, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to live bravely and beautifully through a lifestyle of embodiment. You'll hear gems to empower you around mindset, mindfulness, somatic psychology, and neuroscience, as well as beauty, food, style, and the art of slow living to meet your soul through the senses. I am so happy that you're here. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Come to Your Senses. So if you are like myself and my clients, something that you might struggle with is this idea of discipline. You have something that you desire, you want to show up for it on a regular basis, you want to create your goals and your wants and your vision. And somewhere along the line, you fall into what some might call self-sabotage. Or you have a really strong start and then you get sidetracked and then the goal goes to the next New Year's when you make it as yet another New Year's commitment. This is so common. This is what we humans do. This is what our cute little brains make up about our self-worth and about trying to capture the uncapturable, which is time. But that's another story for another existential deep dive podcast episode. Today, we are going to be exploring the shift from discipline to devotion. So when I was growing up, I grew up very Catholic. My dad was one step away from taking his final vows as a Catholic priest. He decided not to go on that path and eventually met my mom. My mom was a traveling nurse missionary, so I grew up with a really strong Catholic influence, a lot of which I really value because my parents were really, really devoted to this Christ-like essence and the principles of Christianity being love and humility and honesty and all the rest. All the other juicy tidbits. And my dad, because he had been in the seminary from age 13 until age 28, was very committed to the Latin word habitus, which still stimulates a slight traumatic response in my nervous system as I say it today. Habitus means habit or discipline. And discipline can have a tinge of this really masculinized, linear, I experience it as a mind-based way of showing up for the things that matter to you. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there are certain areas of my life where I really enjoy the principle of discipline. In fact, I have an episode called The Art of Discipline, which we'll drop in the show notes. But if you identify as a sensitized, last week we talked about embracing sensitivity as a superpower. And growing up, I remember being in school and I had such a hard time in school. I barely passed through the skin of my teeth from grade to grade, sometimes having to go to summer school. But the one class where I always had the most fun, and I didn't even get a high grade, but I did not give a shit, was art class. Because in art class, we were playing with color and texture and inspiration. I also loved chorus, where we just got to sing the whole time, and I just couldn't even believe my luck that I had an entire 40 minutes to just sing and get credit in school. It was so dreamy. And then the other more linear topics like history and chemistry and social studies and all of that was more of a challenge for my little creative spirit. And so if that is the case for you too, or even if you don't identify as being embodied, fluid, more leaning towards this side of the spectrum that we call the feminine, but you listen to this podcast because you want to be more like that, and you feel like your truest essence is like that. But because of the amount of practice that you've had at overthinking and disembodying, etc., you feel separate from that part of your nature. What you may benefit from is looking at the tiny habits and ways we spend and invest our time through the lens of devotion. So instead of just practice for practice's sake, devotion takes on this flavor of the sacred and moves beyond again, to dip into the existential whirlpool, moves beyond the mortality and the fear of linear time and drops us into more of a state of timelessness. And so in today's Gems, we are going to explore, I'm actually going to share with you from my own practice and research on making that switch from discipline to devotion, and how to build and include more of this energy of timeless sacredness in your tiny habits. Let's dive in to our gems. So where we're going to begin is where we often begin, which is with language. So the word devotion, the definition of that is love, loyalty, or enthusiasm for a person, activity, or cause. The word devote, the etymology of that word is consecrate, which simply means to declare something sacred. Oh, I just love those definitions so much. When I was a kid, I had a fairy godmother that I would go out into our property. We lived on a horse farm, and I would go out on rainy days, especially when there was a foggy mist, and I would go out and I would write in a secret language to my fairy godmother, who was not so much the Cinderella kind of fairy godmother, but more of a Mists of Avalon, purple-robed Angelica Houston kind of fairy godmother. And I would take a little stone and I would etch into other stones, and it was delicious and just gorgeous. And then I would go on Sundays to church, which was a very different experience, but still ritualistic. And something I love about the word profanity or profane, I learned this from one of my mentors, Mama Gina, which is that profane comes from the etymology profanum, which simply means outside the temple. And what's so interesting to me about that is when I would go to church as a little kid, I loved the rituals of Catholicism. When I made my first communion, you would think that I had gotten a backstage pass at a rock concert. I went to church on weekdays. I loved it so much. I loved that ritual of communing through my senses. But as I got older and I related less and less to what was being said and the linear limitations of religious spirituality, what's really interesting to me is that I always thought of my time with my fairy godmother as not real, because it wasn't inside the church and it wasn't of the church. It wasn't approved by that patriarchal lineage and holders of power. And so as we move into our gems, my intent and really the keystone of this episode is reclaiming that right, that spiritual and human right to consecrate what is sacred for you, and to have these sensory, human moments that we experience in our everyday be the temple, if that is what is sacred to you. So the first gem is a question to ask yourself, which is, what am I already devoted to? And you might be devoted to your family or your friendships. You might be devoted to some of these other spiritual concepts like humility or service. And these are all great. But to take an even deeper look at what you're devoted to and what you center in your life, I encourage you, and this is an exercise that you might even want to do, is look at the last 48 to 72 hours. And where did you pour your time and your attention? Looking at your spending and where you're investing your dollars. These can be really, really useful portals of information because, first of all, it helps us to see if what we say we're devoted to actually lines up with how we invest our time, energy, attention, and resources. Because it's really common when wanting to bring something new into our lives to just start with action. And in embodiment, we do a lot of orienting before jumping into action. We do a lot of orienting to how things currently are, because there is a compulsive element to continuously renovating one's life. And in the process of embodiment, it's less about renovation of the self and more about revealing of the self, melting some of the armor and the numbness that keeps us from that sweet honeyed essence and that reliable regenerative guidance inside, which is something that I personally am very, very devoted to. I would say is at the center of my own spiritual practice is that natural essence within myself and helping to facilitate the revealing of that natural essence in others. The next gem and another question to ask yourself to open up some of these new doorways of awareness around devotion is, what is my personal flavor of the sacred? So I've talked about many times on the podcast how I record this podcast from the floor of my closet because all my clothes are in here, which create this beautiful audio buffering. And something that keeps capturing my attention is this long magenta paisley satin robe that has a turquoise trim. And it's vintage. I bought it at a hair salon here in my town when I was with 3 other friends at an event. And it is so incredibly sacred to me. Number one, it's vintage, so it carries that signature of timelessness. And it's got a mystery to it that I will never know who's owned this piece before, where it came from. I bought it with friends, and I remember my friends being like, oh, yes, absolutely, 100%, and telling me all these different ways that I could wear it. I supported a local business. And I invested in something that brings me so much joy, which is innovative, expressive style that reflects my personality, but also the story of what's important to me. So when people compliment me on it, it kind of looks like a smoking jacket. I just love it so much. And I wear it with jeans and with like a tube top underneath. I wear it with a dress. Like there's just so many different ways I can wear it. I don't typically wear it as just a robe around the house. I wear it more kind of like a kimono, layered necklaces, turquoise jewelry brings out the turquoise trim. I mean, I just love it so much. And I can hear in my own voice this enthusiasm. And as we shared at the start, enthusiasm is one of the adjectives that describes and defines devotion. Now, there's another part of my brain that says, oh, you materialistic snob. Shopping is sacred to you. Get a grip. You know, my inner Regina George Regina George from Mean Girls would be very in support of shopping as a sacred art. But, you know, that spiritual proctor inside who is monitoring my bowel movements, my spirit's bowel movements, like a hospital nurse, the perfectionist within me, she has a lot of things to say about it. And what I notice inside my own body is that my brain, when I listen to that proctor and move from that proctor, I feel very unavailable to the sacredness of life. That rich, present moment aliveness of biting into a nectarine and holding Randolph, my foster pup, close to my heart. These tiny moments where I remember my own aliveness and where I feel that timelessness, that sensuality can be such a portal to. The proctor creates a wall between that and me. And the proctor also feels like a vestige of that experience of being a little girl who sat in the front row of her church absorbing messages like pleasure is sinful and desire is the devil. And then I look at the robe shining in my closet light and I just feel childlike glee and I'm twirling it as we speak. And that glee is something that's very, very sacred to me. And so, once again, a question to ask yourself is, what is my particular flavor of sacred? What are some of the things that ignite that aliveness in me? And they might be personal and individualized. They also might be connective, like sex or dating or going out. You know, one of the most sacred moments of my life, sacred practices, is when I'm at my friend Julie's house in the Hamptons and we're blow drying our hair and getting ready together. And it is like Eve and Lilith in the temple. I mean, it's just so sacred. Like I feel a otherworldly connection with my friend Julie Everett, if you're listening. And so that friendship and relationship and beauty, these are all things that carry a very sacred signature for me. And the final gem, I actually had like 6 gems prepared for today, but we're gonna, for the sake of time, end here. And the final gem is, I think, some of the best spiritual advice I've ever received, which is staying out of the results. So when I think about a devotional practice, one of my devotional practices is my embodiment practice, where I get on my mat, I turn on some music, and for 10 to 20 minutes, I move with the sensations of my body and I meet what arises. Could be emotion, thought, sensation, physical sensation. And I give my body this outlet of expression. So some of the ways that we practice embodiment are through awareness, movement, breath, and sound. And this practice was inspired by a practice called Primal Feminine Flow by my mentor, Jenna Ward. Anyway, this practice is devotional because I know something's devotional when the amount of times I've wanted to do it are 0. I know that there's a devotional component when it's something that seems like, oh God, I don't have time for that. Oh, I don't have time to slow down. Are you kidding? And yet I choose to show up anyway because this embodiment practice is one of the ways that I experience spirit speaking through my senses, through the literal sensations of my body. And that's something that's really important to me and that I center in everything that I do. And so I show up on the mat, once again, not from this idea of discipline because I want to get good at it and get my gold star, because I want to have a receptive experience of spirit and also be in partnership. So that's a really big distinction for me around discipline and devotion, is that discipline can feel very isolating. It's individualized. It's about me, and it's about willpower, and it's about showing up. But devotion is about we. It's like I'm devoted to this power greater than myself, this mystery that we call the soul or spirit. And I'm devoted to the way that that expresses through me, as me. And I'm also aware that in order to have the fullest expression of that I can, I have to take some really contrary actions to what I have been taught is going to give me a sense of belonging and connection. So again, when I look back on being a kid and having a religious upbringing, it's like being good, being perfect, capitalist conditioning, hoarding resources, having it all. You know, these are some of the ways that it's portrayed we'll get to heaven, you know, and not just this ethereal idea of the afterlife, but this heaven on earth of feeling okay. And if you've taken these tracks, you might have had some experiences of joy and pleasure and success and achievement, and yet there can be a vacuousness when it is not embodied. And devotion and partnership with spirit and showing up for the actions that I know bring spirit alive within me and within my body are one of the ways that I stay out of the results and just show up one baby step at a time. A way that I practice devotion in my relationship with money that was suggested to me by a peer was to track my numbers for 10 minutes a day and not put the pressure on myself to do every task on my financial organization list all at once. But she said, you know, if you do it for 10 minutes a day, then it's a spiritual practice. It's not me being organized about my finances. And that has really, really shifted the way that I've shown up around a lot of things. My desire to spend part of the summer and fall in California, for example. It's like in the morning when I'm having my coffee and doing my morning journaling practice, I pick up my California travel guide and I read about a little town and all the charming spots in this little town. And so it's like I have this big desire, well, it feels big for me, to go spend a couple of months in a place where I don't really know anyone and explore. And it's a deep soul desire. It's not just something I want to do for fun, even though that's sacred too. There's like a deep calling and a deep meaning around it. And the idea of planning it feels so overwhelming and paralyzing. But one baby step at a time for 10 minutes at a time, and staying out of the results of how and when and where helps me to, again, be in partnership rather than feel like I'm doing this all on my own. And so to recap our gems from today's episode, the first is that devotion is simply declaring something sacred. The second is to ask yourself, what am I already devoted to and where am I pouring my devotion? The third is, what is your flavor of the sacred? And the final is showing up devotionally and staying out of the results. And I'd love to close with a quote from Adrienne Marie's Brown's blog. She wrote a post called Deep Practice, and it's about the discipline and the devotion to show up for some of these different areas of her life on a regular basis and the consequence that she's noticing around that. A friend asked me today how I am, and it amazes me how good I am right now, today. I could point to external factors, recent good news or accolades, but that would be an act of misdirection, because what I want to point to is within me, deep in the folds of my mind and the muscles of my body, deep in the love discipline of my spirit. So, my friends, thank you for listening. I want to say a special shout out today to the members of the Come to Your Senses coterie who have just received their official recognition as savants of the senses. Come to Your Senses coterie is my 6-month group coaching program, and it is an intensive in living artfully, relaxing into presence, and awakening a sensual life. And I am so incredibly proud and just saturated with gratitude for the experience of being on the path of embodiment with these extraordinary souls. So congratulations to all of my coterie coquettes. And if you are interested in creating a life that feels slow, sensual, and sacred, head to schoolofsensualliving.com/coterie, COTERIE. We'll put a link to that in the show notes to join the list to be the first notified when we open it again in just a couple of months. Thank you again so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so delighted and grateful to hear from you in a review, a like, or a subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode. For coaching, classes, and community in creating a lifestyle of embodiment, head to schoolofsensualliving.com. There you'll find a free video series on how to reduce anxiety and intercept the stress response through powerful, confident body language. Head to schoolofsensualliving.com/confidence to watch your first video today.